Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being Monday, the 20th of June, 2016. Time is just flying by, and you may have heard earlier as well, summer solstice in the United States was the longest day of the year to be recorded. I want to thank you for listening to Radio Cayman, for joining For the Record, for allowing us into your homes, into your places of work, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands. Again, trusting that you had a great weekend. I hope it was uneventful as well for those of you who are football fans. A lot of football on the weekend as well. Basketball fans, last night, Cleveland Cavaliers defeated the Golden State Warriors in a dramatic comeback from being down 3-1 in the series. And LeBron James is now getting all of the praises, and he's basically made his mark in the NBA history, really. So lots of excitement over the weekend. Again, I want to thank you for allowing us into your homes, into your places of work, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands. So, of course, For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman. It is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I have the pleasure of being your host. My name is Orit Connor. Some people call me OC. Some people call me other names that we can't mention here on the radio, but call me whatever. I'm here and happy to be your host. You're also welcome to join me in the conversation. You can join me by calling us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. Of course, For the Record would not be possible without the support of our loyal sponsors. For the Record is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance Insurance Company Limited. Tomorrow secured. You can call them at 949-9744 or visit them in Alista Towers. Seaboard Marine, with 35 shipping routes including from Houston, New York, Miami, and Jamaica. Visit seaboardmarine.com for shipping schedules and more. Seaboard Marine, shipping shore to shore. Fidelity Bank, for all your banking and pension needs, call or visit a Fidelity branch today. And, of course, the Cayman Reporter, Caymanian-owned, 100% independent, and 100% free. So pick up your free copy today or log on to www.caymanreporter.com. As stated in our introduction, For the Record is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. This morning, we're going to focus on the local scene. We always want to address issues that may affect you, our listening audience, you, the people of the Cayman Islands, whether you be residents or visitors as well, because when it comes to mosquitoes, they do not discriminate. So whether you're a resident, whether you're a visitor, they will nip you whenever they get the chance. And sometimes, those of you who are in the outdoors, you may see it around 7:30 in the night. They will come down on you and bite you, feed on you for about 20 minutes, and then they're gone. So this morning, we have the pleasure of having in our studio with us to discuss the Aedes aegypti mosquito, to discuss the project that is being put forward to address the whole issue of Zika virus as well. We have in the studio with us Dr. William Petrie. Some of you may know him as Dr. Bill Petrie. He is the director of MRCU. We also have with us Dr. Renard Lacroix. He's the operations manager of Oxitex Cayman Limited. And yes, I said Lacroix as opposed to Lacroix. And if you want to know, French is my 10th language. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC.
Good morning.
And thank you for inviting us, and good morning to the listening public.
Dr. Petrie, let's start with talking about the history of mosquito control in the Cayman Islands. I think that will set a good foundation for a listening audience in terms of, knowing. I'm sure that probably when Christopher Columbus or, well, he sighted here, crossed here, but whoever landed first probably experienced mosquitoes here as well.
I'm sure they did. History of MRCU, big subject, OC, but let me try and give a potted history.
Sure.
Mosquito Research and Control Unit was set up originally in 1965 under the guidance of the late Dr. Marco Giglioli, who some people may know was a tremendous force in scientific and entomology and mosquito control, as was his father before him, actually, in Guyana. And they started operations in 1966. One of the first things that Giglioli did was bring entomologist specialists here from Jamaica in particular, also from Canada and elsewhere, to look at what was the problem. We knew we had a problem. Cayman knew they had a problem. Cows had died previously from mosquito numbers. Kids went to school to smoke pot. OCU, you're not old enough to remember that, but
Tell me about it.
So what they ascertained was that the vast majority of the mosquito problem here was caused by the swamp mosquito. Let's just call it the swamp mosquito. That's the one everyone's familiar with, as you mentioned, comes out just after sunset and can descend on you in numbers. As they moved into different control measures, one thing that Giglioli and his team also did was to look for Aedes aegypti because of its importance as a disease carrier. And they found no aegypti here. They found that aegypti was not established. There was one isolated finding, but basically the mosquito was not established. We think that may have been down to the fact that public health control was carried out in the 1950s by a gentleman called Bertie Ebanks from West Bay and his assistant, whose name I don't have, unfortunately. But it is thought that with the low number of houses at that time in the 1950s, that it was possible for them to have eradicated aegypti at that time. Giglioli set up a monitoring scheme to check whenever Aedes aegypti was introduced, and whenever it was found to be introduced, usually at the dock, not so much at the airport, it's much more commonly at the port of entry. They were able to quickly get rid of aegypti, which makes the point that Renaud and I both want to stress, is that Aedes aegypti is an invasive species. It doesn't belong in the Cayman Islands at all.
Not indigenous.
It's not indigenous. It's not a native species. It was not found here. Over the years, we had several introductions of Aedes aegypti, and I'm focusing on this OC because that's the subject at hand. But
yes.
I mean, there were obviously lots of other things going on in mosquito control. But with regards to aegypti, over the years it was introduced a number of times and removed again. We then sustained an introduction in about the year 2000, and it became increasingly difficult to get rid of it by this time. If you think of the increase in number of houses, residences, the amount of traffic coming in flights as well as containers. And then one of the legacies of Hurricane Ivan was that immediately after Hurricane Ivan, we found a 13-fold increase in the amount of Aedes aegypti, and it was basically island-wide by that time as well. There was so much debris, there was so much stuff lying around for it to breed in. It doesn't breed in the swamp, it doesn't breed in the bush, only breeds around human habitation in containers. So there was so much debris lying around that this is obviously what allowed the Aedes aegypti to expand its range and its numbers. Not on Cayman bracken and Little Cayman, I should stress. So since that time, the Aedes aegypti has become established here, and we now have a situation where we're under threat from dengue and chikungunya. I don't want to leave those out the equation because dengue is not going anywhere. And chikungunya is still circulating in the region. But of course, Zika has taken the headlines, and rightly so. So we now have a public health situation where we, once again, as faced with dengue and chikungunya, we need to do something about Aedes aegypti to protect all residents and tourists, visitors alike, from the possibility of these diseases, particularly with Zika uppermost in mind at the moment.
Okay. So as we stand, we want to hear a little bit from Dr. Lacroix at this time. And
Sure.
want you to tell us some of the things about Oxitec.
Sure. Good morning, OC,
Good morning
and good
again.
morning
Good
to
morning
the listeners. Well, Oxitec is a startup technology that was created in Oxford in 2002. It's a spin-off from the University of Oxford. The company does genetically modified insects, and here we're particularly interested in the genetically modified Aedes aegypti, which is a strain of mosquito that basically is effectively sterile and cannot reproduce in the environment. Our mosquitoes are bred in the lab, and then we make sure we release males and as little possible as females. We have strict quality control to ensure that the number of females we release is insignificant compared to the wild population. And those males, basically, they go out in the field and they look for the females themselves, and that's what they're really good at. They go in your house, they go in the bush, they go everywhere to try and mate. That's their purpose. And the females that are mated with those males have offspring that dies before they become adult, and they can transmit diseases. Doing this, we achieve above 90% reduction in the Aedes aegypti population in about 4 to 6 months. In 5 studies we've done so far in Cayman Islands, in Brazil, and in Panama. And the idea is what the World Health Organization recommends is to control Aedes aegypti to prevent or control the transmission of dengue, chikungunya, or Zika virus. And we are now expanding our operations in Brazil, where we're going to treat an area of about 60,000 people, so basically the size of Grand Cayman in terms of human population.
Okay. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Ort Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Dr. William Petrie, who is the director of the MRC. We also have with us Dr. Renaud Lacroix, who's the operations manager of Oxitec Cayman Limited. We're discussing the Aedes aegypti project here in the Cayman Islands. Lots to talk about. You heard Dr. Lacroix speak about other countries. Brazil, we know the threat in Brazil. We know the issues in relation to the upcoming Olympics in Rio as well. So lots of challenges, and you here in the Cayman Islands, we here in the Cayman Islands want to know what it is all about, because we in the Cayman Islands are also affected by those mosquitoes. Please stay tuned. For the Record is going to take a commercial break. When we come back, the conversation will continue. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record, where I have in the studio with me this morning the director of MRCU, Dr. William Petrie, as well as Dr. Renaud Lacroix, who's the operations manager of Oxitex Cayman Limited. During the course of our commercial break, we were discussing the projects that were started by Oxitex, and of course, I learned that the Cayman Islands were the first in terms of this project. But Dr. Lacroix, there are other countries as well, other areas that you have been involved with. Can you tell our listening audience about those? Again, we're setting the foundation for what Oxitex has been doing, and then we're going to later on discuss specifically in the Cayman context what's happening now.
Sure. The strain of Aedes aegypti, which we call the friendly Aedes aegypti, has been tested in laboratory for about 15 years now, since it was created. That has been done in several countries with collaborators in universities and research institutes all around the world. And after about 7 years of research on it in the lab, where we were confident and we were sure those mosquitoes were safe and didn't pose a risk to the environment or the human population, we started experimenting them in the field and testing if the technology worked and was actually managing to reduce the mosquito population. This obviously was done after a very strict regulatory process where the technology was evaluated by independent bodies. For example, in Brazil, it was a body called CTN-Bio, which I'm not going to explain what the letters are because it's all in Brazilian, which wouldn't help
Portuguese.
many people. Portuguese, exactly. No, they say Brazilian.
Oh, they say Brazilian?
Don't kid down that, yes. So after the permit was granted, we worked with the University of São Paulo and Moscamed, which is a research institute in Brazil, and we started a trial in the north of Brazil, in the state of Bahia, where we released mosquitoes for about a year, a bit more than a year in the end, and we do, as usual, we monitor the population when we do any trial. Our mosquitoes carry a self-limiting gene that prevents them from reproducing, but they also carry a marker gene, which is a red, they produce a red fluorescent protein that make them glow under a specific UV light. So we set up traps in the field, and then we collect eggs from those traps, and the eggs we bring back in the lab, we hatch them, and then we can screen the larvae to see if they're fluorescent or not. And that enables us to know how many of the mosquitoes have been fathered by our mosquitoes, so that we know if only 10% of the larvae are fluorescent, well, we're not doing a very good job, we should release more mosquitoes. We're usually aiming at having above 50% of the larvae being fathered by our mosquitoes, and then we know we should achieve suppression in 4 to 6 months. That also enables us to make sure that the mosquitoes, that the gene disappears from the environment. When we stop releases, we screen for that fluorescent gene, and after a few weeks, usually 4 to 8 weeks, we don't see them anymore. So that shows that the mosquitoes can't sustain themselves in the field, and they actually disappear once you stop releasing them. So in Brazil, in the town of Juazeiro, and a suburb called Itaberaba, after a few months, we saw a 93% reduction, I believe, in the Aedes aegypti population. And that was that was the second experiment in the field after East End in Cayman in 2010, where we also had a 96% reduction. We then followed through with another city in Nordeste of Brazil, which is called Mandacaru, where that trial was a bit bigger, and we were treating the whole town. There was no, around it was just bush and very dry land, like the state of Bahia is. So the mosquitoes couldn't come from outside the study area. And there we managed to achieve 99% reduction in the Aedes aegypti population. We did another trial in Panama 2 years ago, in a town called, it's escaping me right now, just nearby Panama City, sorry. And in about 6 months of releases, we had 94% reduction in mosquitoes. Mosquitoes in Aedes aegypti, the dengue vector. So it's just to show that this is a very well-tested tool, and we're now moving on to the operational stage, and that's why we're here in Cayman to try to give a new tool to build an MRCU to be able to be integrated in the Aedes aegypti control to help protect the Caymanians and the visitors from dengue, chikungunya, and Zika virus.
Okay. Now, very quickly before we go to our headline news, you mentioned 2010 East End. You mentioned places in Brazil. We know that the plans are for the release in West Bay. How do you go about selecting particular areas? What's the rationale? What's the criteria?
The field trial in East End was an idealized trial, so we needed somewhere that was relatively secluded, isolated, so you don't have problems of mosquitoes coming in from outside to upset your data.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, East End didn't have a particularly high population of Aedes aegypti. It's not a real hotspot for it. So it was for a pilot study, it was a good area to choose. It wasn't a very big area, and we used a comparison area in Bordentown to compare the results. In the case of West Bay, if I have a couple of minutes, we have the West Bay. One of the main reasons that West Bay has been chosen for the operational rollout. First of all, it's a hot spot for Aedes aegypti. We know this from many years' experience. We do find Aedes aegypti in high numbers in parts of West Bay. Also, we have seen incidents of dengue, particularly dengue, but also chikungunya in West Bay. And the treatment area that we have designated also has natural boundaries, vegetation on 3 sides, or at least 2 sides, and then the shoreline to the south. And Aedes aegypti mosquito doesn't travel far in nature, and it doesn't like to cross these boundaries, so it kind of helps us have an isolated area. Plus, there's an area just to the north, which we've designated very similar size and human population, which we can use as a comparison, as a non-treatment. Georgetown is another or the other hotspot. We would like to be able to roll out somewhere a bit easier first and do a lot of monitoring to see how well it's going before we are able to expand either into West Bay or into the more difficult challenge of Georgetown. But that's the long-term plan.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Oric Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, Dr. William Petrie, Director of MRCU, as well as Dr. Renaud Lacroix, who is the Operational Manager of Oxitex Cayman Limited. We're discussing the Aedes aegypti project here in the Cayman Islands, a topic that will affect all of you because, like we said earlier, mosquitoes do not discriminate. They bite everyone. So please continue to follow and listen to For the Record. We're going to go to our headline news now. When we return, the discussions will continue, and also remember our phone lines are open. We will also be providing for our listening audience some of the responses to the challenges that have been raised in relation to this project here in the Cayman Islands as well. And of course, we always want to present a balanced view on For the Record. So please stay tuned. For the Record will be back immediately after the news. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. I want to remind you that our phone lines are open. Our toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255, provided courtesy of Flo, 949-8037 and 949-6990. You can also email us at For the Record, one word, For the Record at candw.ky. We know you're listening. We know that many times we have lots of calls at the end of the show, which invariably causes the show to run over time. So we welcome you to make your calls early if you want. This will also give you an opportunity to call a second time. We know that you're listening, and if you find that you really want to listen more and get more information, that is fine as well. And also remember that For the Record will be rebroadcast on government TV as well. In the studio with me this morning, we have Dr. Bill Petrie, the director of MRCU, and Dr. Renaud Lacroix, who is the operations manager of Oxitex Cayman Limited. We're talking about the Zika outbreak, as well as the Aedes aegypti mosquito. And we have lots of information here in relation to it as well. Here's an article on BBC, talks about the mosquito Aedes aegypti causing a widespread fear in Brazil, where it's spreading the Zika virus that has been linked to thousands of babies being born with birth defects. And some of the things that we can know about it, it loves our cities, that you've heard our guests talk about that as well. Sorry. The Aedes aegypti mosquito also harbor a bunch of diseases, including the chikungunya, as well as yellow fever. Sorry. We also know that over 390 million people are infected with the dengue virus each year, largely as a result of bites from the Aedes aegypti mosquito as well. So lots of information there. Dr. Petrie, we also have some information from the World Health Organization in relation to the number of countries and territories that are experiencing a first outbreak of the Zika virus as well. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yes, thanks, OC. You can see we have it in front of us here in the studio, a document from the World Health Organization, an update on Zika and microcephaly and Guillain-Barre syndrome from the 9th of June. And what is of concern is that we can see in our region, we have the 39 countries and territories now experience Zika outbreak for the first time with transmission. And this comes under, we come under PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, as under the umbrella of the World Health Organization. And these 39 countries, which are listed in our region, and this is what puts us at threat of getting the Zika virus, as well as the other diseases that Aedes aegypti carries. But the World Health Organization's update of the 9th of June also states that these 39 countries present a high risk of Guillain-Barre syndrome, microcephaly, and other neurological disorders associated with Zika virus. So we do have a public health imperative. We are at threat from Zika virus coming into the Cayman Islands. And I should stress, I've said this before, but it bears repeating, it's human beings that carry the virus around to the different countries and territories. The virus is not being transported by mosquitoes moving from country to country. It's the movement of largely labor and people and visitors, but it's this globalization of labor movement around the globe which puts us at threat to the threat of having Zika virus introduced here.
Okay, let's move on to, again, focus on here in the Cayman Islands. And of course, there has been some opposition to the project that is being introduced, or should I say reintroduced into the Cayman Islands, because you talked about in 2010 that the project was initiated in East End as well. And there has been a group who have asked that the project, which is slated for West Bay, that it should be delayed. Since then, the government has indicated that the project will move forward. It is certainly unfortunate that any sort of controversy has to be introduced into this issue, because it is a public health issue, not only to the Cayman Islands, but globally. But at the same time, there are some concerns that those who want the project delayed have as well. And how do we go about addressing those concerns?
I think the first thing we should mention is that, as I mentioned before, this is not something that the Friendly Aedes aegypti is not released without control. The project has been reviewed by the National Conservation Council, which falls under the very recent conservation law, which is mandated to, among other things, look into the genetically modified organisms regulatory process for the Cayman Islands. So MRCU has actually applied to that council so that they could look at what were the risks for the environment and for the human population of the Friendly Aedes aegypti. And after reviewing all the aspects of the project, they stated that it didn't pose a risk to the Cayman Islands, and that's why they approved the project. This is not, that's I want to mention, and this is very strictly regulated, and it's the same in every country where we've worked. We actually spend more time getting the regulatory process done and approved than actually releasing mosquitoes so far. So it's an absolutely safe technique. It doesn't have any impact on the environment. It's extremely targeted as well. It only affects the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which is, as Bill mentioned earlier, a non-native species in Cayman and is an invasive species pretty much everywhere else in the world. To be honest, it's native from Africa, but now it can be found all around the tropics, and that's why so many people are at risks of all the viruses it can transmit.
Okay.
If I can
Dr.
just back
Petrie?
that up.
Sure.
Yes, if I can just back that up, we'll see. One of the pieces of misinformation that was disseminated by the negative campaign was that there's no legislation in Cayman to govern such projects, and no regulatory procedure or process. So that in fact is not the case. The National Conservation Law specifically governs genetically modified organisms. It's actually in that legislation. And as Renaud has pointed out, the National Conservation Council, who have responsibility for implementing that law and overseeing what is done under those auspices, reviewed the whole project and technique, as did the Department of Environment in the Cayman Islands and the Department of Agriculture. So those agencies have all reviewed and approved the use of the project. And I just want to repeat, I may have mentioned it earlier, but the technique is also recommended for use by the World Health Organization. And also PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, has also announced that it will give support to countries in our region, jurisdictions who need support and help in implementing this particular type of project. And I should say, just to emphasize the point, the World Health Organization did not arrive at that conclusion quickly or lightly. And in fact, what they did, the World Health Organization commissioned a group of independent scientists and specialists from around the world, a group of 13 scientists who do not work for World Health Organization and who do not work for various governments. These are respected academics at various universities and research institutes around the world. And that they formed a group commissioned by World Health Organization to review novel methods of control of Aedes aegypti, because it is understood that we need as many new types of control against Aedes aegypti that we can possibly find and use, which are feasible for use. That group is called the Vector Control Advisory Group. They reported back to WHO, and based on their review, the World Health Organization, in a document of 18th of March issued from Geneva, recommended the carefully planned pilot deployment under operational conditions, accompanied by rigorous independent monitoring. And that basically sums up exactly what we have planned to do in West Bay. Mm-hmm. So just to allay people's fears that this has been reviewed, it has been deemed to be safe by numerous regulatory bodies, both in the Cayman Islands and other countries, and also by the World Health Organization.
Okay, the other obvious question is, if not this project, what other methods would you employ in addressing the issue?
Well, perhaps I should address that rather than Renault, as he's Oxitec Cayman Limited. The fact of the matter is that Aedes aegypti is extremely difficult to control. It's very difficult to get rid of, but it's even difficult just to keep the numbers down because of its biology and its behavior. So it's well understood and recognized in the industry that you need to use as many different types of control as possible against Aedes aegypti. By contrast, the swamp mosquito, you only need one or two methods really to control it. It's a far simpler prospect. Although the swamp mosquito occurs in much higher numbers and causes much more of a nuisance factor and causes us all the phone calls and complaints, it's relatively straightforward if you have the equipment and the funding and the expertise to deal with it, with aircraft and so on. But Aedes aegypti is a different prospect altogether. So you have to use as many methods as you can. And what we currently use, and we will continue to use, what's called space sprays, basically spraying. But again, you're having to spray in residential areas. You're having to spray around people's houses. Residual sprays are also very useful. Those are different types of sprays where the insecticide coats vegetation or wall surfaces and lasts for a couple of weeks. Okay. That's also very useful. And larviciding is another method where you try and kill the mosquito larvae, the immature stages in breeding in the water. Of course, this is all very labor intensive, and you have to find the breeding sites, which are little cups or containers, plant pots, garbage, tires, lying around people's yards. And then also source reduction is the removal of those items. And part of that, of course, is educational campaign to try and persuade people to clean your yard. So we use those methods. We continue to use them. We have researched other methods. We're currently looking at two types of traps that might be useful against the Aegypti, not finally tested as yet. A very low-tech solution as compared to using aircraft or genetically modified mosquitoes. We have done a research project to ascertain whether we can get larvicide droplets sufficiently small enough but with potent dose down into these containers in which they breed. We've had some success with that project, but it may not be feasible for a number of other reasons, application, finances. So the thing with this, with Egypti, is to use as many methods as you can, and it's called integrated control. And I mentioned earlier on at the start of the program about Dr. Marco Giglioli. And one of the things that he constantly emphasized was integrated control. Use as many methods as you can, and especially against Aedes aegypti. And just to finish up with that, OC, is one of the big problems with Aegypti is insecticide resistance. And this is something that people have found around the world, not just here. We did our own studies here on Aegypti in collaboration. There was an officer, a staff member at MRCU, who is now Dr. Angela Harris. She was awarded a PhD in collaboration with, that was by the University of Liverpool School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and her work in collaboration with London School showed that our Aedes aegypti here, unfortunately, are resistant to a wide range of insecticides. So that adds to the whole emphasis of using integrated control. So we recognize, as do people in the industry and World Health Organization, that we need as many tools as we can against the Aegypti. And the use of genetically modified mosquitoes, the sterile males, holds great promise. It looks like it may well be a very useful additional tool to what we currently use. And that's the whole reason why we're going to roll out this operation.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Ort Connor. My guests in the studio with me this morning, Dr. William Petrie and Dr. Renaud Lacroix. Please stay tuned. For the Record will be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Dr. William Petrie, Dr. Renaud Lacroix. We want to talk about this, specifically about the project here in the Cayman Islands and how it works. And then after that, we're going to come back to deal with some of the questions that have been raised in adverts that have been published in relation to their concerns about the project here in the Cayman Islands.
Sure. So to explain how the technology and the product works, basically Oxitec is producing eggs in UK. We're keeping a colony that's being genetically modified in UK, and we maintain that in UK under very strict quality control conditions. We make sure they still express the trait and they still express the self-limiting gene, and that they are free from diseases. Then those eggs, they're really small, right? I don't know if any of you have seen the small Aedes aegypti eggs, but you can, in a gram, you have thousands of them, tens of thousands of them. And they are very resilient, those eggs. That's how they basically invade the whole tropical world. In containers, the eggs can survive up to a year. Wow. And that's how they came to Cayman Islands. So those eggs, we can ship them to Cayman very easily, and then here we've set up a facility in MRCU compound, and we've hired 4 local people. 3 of them are West Bayers actually, and those young people have will receive the eggs, hatch the eggs in that facility, and then we will breed the larvae for about a week. We will feed them daily, take care of them, make sure they're all good. That might not seem like the first thing you want to do with mosquitoes, but those ones, we're actually taking care of them. And after the end of the larval period, the mosquitoes develop into pupae, which is like the chrysalid for a butterfly. Mm-hmm. When they become they mature to be flyers and emerge as adults. We can separate the male and the female pupae quite easily because the males are smaller than the females. Those males, we then take a sample, make sure we find a low level of females in them. And then those males go into release spots, and those release spots I'll maintain for a couple of days. We give them a bit of water sugar, because male mosquitoes don't bite. They don't drink blood. They can't drink blood. They only feed on sugar, like nectar or fruits.
Okay.
The female mosquitoes bite because they need the proteins in your blood, and that's why they bite you. Otherwise, they can't reproduce. But the males don't need that. So we keep the males in the lab for a few days until they pass their teenagehood, basically, and they're able to reproduce. And then we'll put them in a van and go to West Bay and release them through a predefined path. So I think it's been mentioned before that those mosquitoes don't fly very far, usually on average 50 to 100 meter. 150 to 200 feet. If I have to talk in local.
Yes.
I still have trouble with that.
We haven't gone metric.
No, well, I'm trying to get used to the imperial system. So 150 to 300 feet. So you have to release them at very frequent intervals, so that they can fly around, go into every little piece, in the bush, in the houses, and they look for females. That's what they do, and that's the beauty of the technology. It's using the mosquito biology itself to control it, and that's why it's so efficient. And those males, they find females. As I say, they're good at it.
They're pretty good at it.
They're pretty good at it.
Following human instincts.
Yes, and so the females that mate with the friendly Aedes aegypti, they're going to lay eggs, and those eggs are going to eclose, and the larvae are going to die at the late larvae pupal stage before they become adults.
Okay.
So that's how we manage after a while, when you continue releasing mosquitoes and get a lot of females mated with our mosquitoes, you manage to achieve over 90% reduction in the Aedes aegypti population.
Okay. We have one caller online. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Regarding the antidote used to be able to grow the mosquitoes, in what ways could the mosquito encounter that antidote out in the natural world, and would it reverse the limiting gene as you hope?
I'll mention something first, and then pass to Renaud. What I would say, the antidote, tetracycline, all the bodies who have reviewed the project and the technique have found that they state that you're not likely, it's highly unlikely to find tetracycline in the environment. The mosquitoes are just not going to be able to find any tetracycline anywhere in which to breed, and therefore have the antidote.
What about in medication, for example?
They would have to, the larvae would have to be able to breed in water that had the tetracycline in it. Even if that were somehow feasible, it would just simply mean that those mosquitoes would survive longer, but then their progeny die anyway. Renaud?
That's a really good question. As Bill said, tetracycline is a very commonly used antibacterial product. The place where Aedes aegypti breeds, the breeding sites, are not sewers. They're discarded containers, basically, and they're mostly filled with rainwater. So that kind of containers doesn't have access to sewers who could be potentially contaminated by tetracycline, and which would enable the larvae to survive. I should also mention that tetracycline is highly degradable under sunlight. It doesn't persist under sunlight. It's basically destructed in a couple of days. And the mosquitoes need 1 to 2 weeks to develop from larvae to adult. So even if a container was contaminated with tetracycline, it would probably not sustain itself long enough to have an effect on the mosquitoes. And even if it had, it would be just a local problem and just a one-time problem. And then
So
we would continue releases to prevent it. Sorry?
In other words, you're saying that the only phase in the mosquito's life cycle is in the larvae stage, and if they come in contact with the tetracycline after they've mature, it doesn't reverse the limiting gene.
Oh no, it doesn't. No, the
Only
adults.
in the larvae stage.
Yes, the gene is only expressed during the larval stage. That's what enables us to release the males, because once they are adults, they're not. The gene is not expressed in the adult; it's expressed in the progeny and in the larvae. Even if a female is biting someone who has ingested tetracycline, her progeny will still die, as any normal female will, if you see my meaning.
Right. So if I'm understanding this correctly, a percentage of the mosquitoes released will be female. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What percentage is that?
On average, 0.03%.
Okay, and let me set up a scenario for you.
Sure.
Let's just say we're at a house, we're having a function. There were some people who came to the island to visit. They just came from Brazil, right in the heart of Zika, and a female mosquito that your company released, that person, and let's just say for argument's sake, the mosquito didn't get filled, and then he comes over and he bites me. Is there any transmission in that way?
So there is transmission in that way, but it takes time. Basically, when a mosquito bites someone infected by dengue, Zika, or chikungunya, there is what we call an extrinsic incubation period where the virus goes into the stomach of the mosquitoes. And then once in the stomach, it stays there for a few days to multiply. And then it is expressed in large numbers, and then it's distributed in the rest of the body of the mosquito until it can go into the salivary glands. And that's once it's in the salivary glands that it can be transmitted to someone else. That's heavily dependent on temperature. The higher the temperature, the faster the virus develops. So it usually takes, depending on the virus, 5 to 10 days for the virus to be ingested by the mosquito, and then for the mosquito to be able to transmit the disease. Our mosquitoes are lab mosquitoes. They've been in the lab for a long time. They're not used to see predators to look for food because they have sugar solution readily available all the time. So they're not as good as field mosquitoes, the natural mosquitoes, to survive. And our females are very unlikely to survive long enough for the virus to develop into them. And the number of females we release is around 1% of the wide population. So they don't make any contribution in the numbers of Aedes aegypti in the environment. We probably catch more females with our adult traps than we release, actually. And I'm not even counting the egg traps, where we catch tens of thousands of eggs over a 6-month period.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think you raised two very good points there, and I thank you for raising them. And on the scenario that you set up, while it is unlikely that a released female would live long enough to develop the virus, I think the point is just to emphasize what Renaud just stated. You're far more likely to be bitten by a wild Aedes aegypti female. There are lots more Aedes aegypti females out there already biting people, already potentially able to transmit virus, than the numbers of mosquitoes that we would be releasing.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, are you saying that the incubation period in the intestine of the mosquito is the only way that the mosquito can transfer it to another person, and not simply by the fact that the mosquito is, for all intents and purposes, using the same utensil from one person to the other?
That's correct. The virus has to go through a developmental process in the mosquito itself, which can be quite complex in different viruses, and then it has to get from the gut of the mosquito into the salivary glands, etc. So yeah, there is a developmental process. It can't just transmit like on a needle, for example, from one person to another, just like that. No.
Okay. Caller, we're going to ask you to leave us there. We have some other callers lined up as well. Thanks very much for those important questions.
Very good.
Let's take the other caller before we go to a commercial break, Paul. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, MC. I'm going to try to make this short and sweet here. I have a question for the gentleman over there. That, I think it was several years ago when they went down to Brazil and they did this thing, letting go the genetically GM mosquitoes. And I never heard of Zika before that, and now there's word out there that they think that these mosquitoes that were let go might have somehow created this Zika. I don't know what that. But my point is this, that what gets me is when I hear, so many other people are in different parts of the world are talking about they don't want this GM mosquito in their country and this kind of thing. And you come to Cayman, little old Cayman down here, and we accept it. And we say, yeah, come on, give it to us, and it's almost like the Oxitec came down and said, we're going to do this wonderful thing for you. But they're not telling you, well, we're experimenting with this. We don't know for sure if it's going to work. But we want to try it here because you don't have any Aedes aegypti here and so on. And my thing is this. You mess with Mother Nature, the likelihood is you're going to, and I'll give you a good example. You remember Chernobyl? When they said that anything that was in that area, when after that happened, it's going to, all the animals are going to die and they're going to mutate it and all this kind of stuff. And it turns out that these animals adopted to whatever it was there, the radiation and so forth like that, and they're still existing. What I'm saying is we tend to forget the abilities of Mother Nature to adjust to almost any kind of situation. And I'm afraid that I noticed it since, and this is me personally, I've noticed it since we had you let go the genetically modified mosquitoes here some time ago. I don't hear the females were always like buzzing and singing when they come to bite you. Now I notice they're very silent. They don't say anything. You just see them on your skin. And I wonder why that is. These are things that concern me, and I'm worried about what this, because I'm sure that Oxitec not doing this because they want to be nice neighbors or something. They're going to make money out of this deal somehow. And that is this part that worries me, because I know that pharmaceutical companies, and especially in the United States, and the FDA, which is the governing body over there, they're like good buddies. And a lot of times they put things on the market because the FDA put it out there, and people think it must be okay because they've given us the permission to use it. And then down the road, there was one item that
well, remember, now we're dealing more with PAHO than the FDA.
But I'm saying that these things, there's always this collusion between the governing bodies, and not just in the FDA, but in any country, these people seem to be good buddies, and they let this for whatever reason. And these are the things that worry me about when we hear about these things happening. And I hope to God that it's going to be a good thing. But once it's there and it starts to mutate into some weird creature, I know that Oxitec hasn't figured that one out yet. They just want to get it out there. When Oxitec can come and says, well, if to do this or to do that, and then we'll be able to take care of them, we'll get rid of them. But to end the story, I don't want to take too much long. Why doesn't Oxitec or other companies that these companies like that, we got iguanas by the millions here. Maybe government should be talking to Oxitec about getting rid of some of these iguanas that are destroying the farmers' produce and the poor farmers they got to be paying people to shoot them and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, caller, unfortunately, the iguanas do not present a health problem to us.
Not yet.
Yeah, unless unless we were able to, at some point in time, maybe eat the Aedes aegypti mosquito, like how some people are eating the iguanas. Then,
that's a good point. That's a good point, Jose. But the thing is that we have a situation here where we don't know what this genetically modified thing is.
Your point is well taken, and we will have both our guests here address that. We're going to do that actually after we take this commercial break. When we come back, we will have our two guests here address the concerns that the last caller raised. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record, where I have as my guests in the studio Dr. William Petrie, Director of MRCU, and Dr. Renaud Lacroix, who is the Operations Manager of Oxitec's Cayman Limited. Our last caller had some interesting and important points raised. Those they may be unscientific to a certain extent, but at the same time, those are concerns that we hear resonating from many members of the public as well. Dr. Petrie.
Thanks, OC. Yes, actually, I thank the caller for raising these issues and asking these questions, because it does give us an opportunity to clarify certain things and to allay people's fears. There were a whole number of points, so let me try and address some of them. The suspicion, the notion that genetically modified mosquitoes could have caused Zika virus or somehow brought the situation about in Brazil is not correct. Zika virus has actually been known since 1947, when it was first identified in Uganda, long before genetic manipulation techniques ever came along. And also there's another piece of misinformation that genetically modified mosquitoes may be responsible for all the birth defects and Guillain-Barré syndrome and so on. That has now been refuted by several scientific bodies, and the World Health Organization has now announced that there is a scientific consensus that Zika virus is a cause of microcephaly, birth defects, and Guillain-Barré syndrome. Another point I think that was raised, that the trials that we did in East End in 2010, those mosquitoes are long dead. Male mosquitoes only live 2-3 days, female mosquitoes 2 to 3 weeks, roughly. So those mosquitoes are long gone. We have 35, 36 different types of mosquitoes in Cayman. Some of them you can hear when they're biting you, some you do not. And also depends not just on the type of mosquito, but where they might be biting you. Another point to make is that this technique, which again has been reviewed thoroughly for safety and efficacy of the technique, it uses a self-limiting gene. So what that means is that all of the mosquitoes that are released will all die. All of the progeny will die. As soon as you stop doing the program, it goes away. There's nothing there to be established in the environment. unlike other techniques which actually attempt to do that, I think another point that needs to be made is that we do have Aedes aegypti here. It's not the case of saying, well, we don't have this mosquito, therefore we don't have this threat. Why are we doing this? We're doing it, as OC has pointed out, for public health reasons. It's for this is proactive. We're trying to be proactive here to prevent the risk of transmission of disease should we be unfortunate enough to have the disease introduced. We have lots of the mosquitoes that are capable of transmitting the disease, and this is one tool that we can add to our arsenal against Aedes aegypti. Bruno, I think there were some other points.
And if I could just add to that,
yes.
Dr. Petrie, also, we see now where the Cayman Islands is being bunched with other jurisdictions within the Caribbean in terms of travel, advice. We're being bunched with those as well, despite the fact that we have not had any case of the Zika virus here.
True,
in the Cayman Islands.
We've had one case of dengue this year so far. We have had no Zika so far. It's worth mentioning that we've just come into the rainy season. We've seen an increase in Aedes aegypti mosquitoes already. That's not surprising. And we have, in fact, initiated other controls against Aegypti, stepped up our spraying against Aegypti. So we come into the rainy season, and you're right, OC, that we are actually surrounded by countries and jurisdictions that have a very high prevalence of Zika right now. So we can't be complacent. As I said, this is another tool that we can use against this mosquito.
Okay, Dr. LaCour, one of our listeners had a few questions. Wanted to know who owns Oxitex Cayman Limited, and then the question is it collaboration between the government and your company, or is this more of a business venture? And who is doing this project, MRC or Oxitec? Are the funds for this project going to Oxitec or MRCU, or to both?
Okay, so to reply to the first point, Oxitec is fully owned by Intraxon, which is a biotech company that has a number of branches and works basically on DNA and improvement in biological sciences to provide public health or medicines or in that kind of sector, basically. That's true since it's not even a year since Oxitec has been owned by Intraxon, so it's still quite new for us, to be honest. The project here in Cayman is a collaboration between Oxitec and MRCU. We are sharing resources on that project. Oxitec is basically providing the eggs and the staff to produce the male mosquitoes. That's why we've hired 4 local people, providing them with a job here. And MRCU is providing resources as well. They're conducting the monitoring to make sure that the project works, and they're also providing the expertise in mosquito control, since normal mosquito control methods will still be carried out in the treated area where we're going to release our mosquitoes. If the best thing that can happen is that it's going to increase the MRCU control of Aedes aegypti in that area. So it will be beneficial to the people there.
Okay. We have one more caller. Going to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning to you and to your panel. I have a question directly for Dr. Petrie.
Go right ahead.
Recently, we've had an influx of mosquitoes, but every time of the day you go outside, mosquitoes swarm you. High heat, high midday heat, they're out there. Morning, noon, and night. And I live in the Red Bay area, and I don't hear any spraying going on or anything. So can you tell us what is happening and what they're doing to try and control them? It reminds me of the times growing up when we had swarms of mosquitoes and we had to take out our smoke pots and all that and get in by evening and lock up in the house. So can you tell us what's being done to try and control them, get rid of them?
Yes, indeed. Just to point out that the mosquitoes you're experiencing there, that's not Aedes aegypti. It's primarily the swamp mosquito coming out of the mangrove swamps and associated wetlands. What's happened is this is the start of the rainy season. This is what happens every June. We have done a number of operations so far to keep the numbers down. Hopefully we won't have to go back to smoke pots and the like. We conducted a large-scale what's called larviciding, where we drop pellets or granules out of the aircraft to prevent the emergence of the mosquitoes. It kills the larval state, the immature stages in the water. And we treated around about 13,000 acres on all 3 islands. It's not 100% effective. You can't get to all the areas. So we still do have an emergence of mosquitoes. They've been pretty bad the past week, past 10 days, on all 3 islands as well, actually. But as far as what we've done, we have had both aircraft and 5 trucks out repeatedly on Grand Cayman, and having to do a good bit of fogging with the truck on Little Cayman, and also 3 vehicles out in force on Cayman Brac. So we have been, it's not always noticeable, but we have been spraying repeatedly over the weekend and public holidays as well. Last weekend, long weekend, we found we had to get out there on the public holiday and had 2 aircraft and 5 trucks out. So we are endeavouring to get those numbers under control, which we should be able to within the next week, hopefully. But just to stress again, this is not the Aedes aegypti. This is not a disease threat mosquito.
I understand that, but I can't even walk out in my yard at all. It's no time of day. They swarm you and bite you, and it's just not comfortable to go out there, you know?
No, I agree, and I understand that, and this is why we need to keep up our mosquito control. What I can ask you to do, or I can take the information, what we encourage people to do is to call 949-2557, and the receptionist at that number, she has a database to her disposal where she enters the details, the location, and all the complaint details, and then she can pass that on to be actioned, which helps us to operate as well.
Caller, did you get that number?
Yes, I know. I've called a couple of times and asked them to come out, and I must say that they have been very cooperative. And the last time I called, they came within an hour. I don't know what they did, but the mosquitoes were still about. That was maybe about 2-3 weeks ago. But I'll call again.
Thank you very much.
The number is 949-255-7.
7.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very
that's
much.
correct.
Thank you very much, caller.
Thank you.
Dr. Petrie, we see where more of a natural vegetation, especially swamp areas, are being developed now. One would assume that as a result of that we would probably see a reduction in the number of mosquitoes if their breeding areas are being reduced. But what is the flip side of that?
That's a very good point, OC. That's a very salient point. And what you do, unfortunately, well, we have seen a reduction in those types of mosquitoes, the swamp mosquito. If you look at a graph of the kind of numbers that we used to get years ago compared to now, although you do get instances like this emergence currently where it does seem like the mosquitoes are really bad, overall there has been a a sustained decrease in the numbers. Unfortunately, when you develop the mangrove swamps or remove mangrove swamps, you swap in one problem for another, because those areas then tend to get built up, and what you end up with is dealing with other mosquito problems, such as Aedes aegypti, which is purely an urban mosquito. It's only around dwellings. But you also get other problems. There is one mosquito that causes us a lot of work, which breeds only in septic tanks, or not only in septic tanks. I'm sorry, it's the only one here that breeds in septic tanks, and it can be a real nuisance. So you swap one problem for another. Essentially is what happens. Rather than just getting rid of the mosquito problem, it changes. And actually the bigger problem, the swamp problem, is easier to deal with than having to deal with domestic and urban mosquitoes.
Precisely. Okay, we have another caller, two callers. Let's go to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning to you and the panel.
Good morning.
Quick question. What kind of insecticide or do you all spray? Do you use to spray? And is it still diesel used as a disperser?
Your second question first. We we don't use diesel as the diluent. Fortunately, we've moved on from that a long time ago. Many years ago, we were able to not have to use diesel or any other kind of solvent. The insecticides that we use predominantly, well, there aren't very many left nowadays that actually work, but the preferred class of insecticides is called pyrethroids, and we use two. I can give you the brand names rather than sort of technical chemical names, but we use one called aquareslin, which is a pyrethroid, and we use one called DeltaGuard, which is also a pyrethroid. These are able to be dissolved in water, and they are approved by the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States. They're approved for use in public health settings. And then we have a third one, which is called mosquito mist, which is in a different class. It's an organophosphate, which is also it's not our first choice of use, but it's also approved by the EPA. And what we prefer to do is to alternate those insecticides as much as possible to try and reduce the risk of getting insecticide resistance. We also, however, predominantly use much more larvicides these days, and these are typically pellets or granules which can be applied by aircraft or ground equipment to treat a variety of different kinds of mosquitoes. And they're much more efficient and much more effective, these kind of things, rather than spraying. So the spraying nowadays is a backup to the larviciding, which is the bulk of the control nowadays.
And the larviciding, is it more important to do it before the rainfall or during rainfall?
The most important one is the one you do just before the rains. So you've got to try and guess when the rainy season is going to start, get your pellets down about a couple of weeks beforehand, and then get it done before the rains come. So there's a bit of judgment there. The granules or pellets are not conventional type insecticides. There's one is an insect growth regulator, so it disrupts the growth pattern of the immature insects. There's another couple which use toxins from bacteria, which naturally occurring bacteria, which attack mosquito larvae. So those are very useful to use.
Okay. Let's go to the phone lines again. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, gentlemen. Number one from the Brack.
Morning, number one. How are you?
Oh, I'm listening to you quite clear.
Morning, number one on the Brack.
Yeah. I just wanted to confirm what you said a while ago about the trucks, because I tell you what, they've been spraying up here. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure, once or twice I heard a plane.
The aircraft was over on the Brack and Little Cayman dropping granules.
Yes, I thought I heard her. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to back you up on that because from time I know about the MRCU, they've been doing a wonderful job on the BRAC. And I'm not going to talk halfway. If they wasn't, I would say get them out.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. And yes, it's always a difficult task. We've also been operational on Little Cayman, which has had a serious problem.
Yeah.
But we did send one officer up there to help deal with the situation. But yeah, the plane was doing the pellets, and then we've had the trucks out on the BRAC.
Okay, I thought
since
I heard her once or twice, but
yeah.
you know sometimes when you go, can't hear her, one ear good, it sounds funny. So anyway, you all have a good day, and I say keep up the good works, okay?
Thank you very much, number one.
Okay,
You have
bye.
a great day as well, folks.
Thank you.
Folks, I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guest with me this morning, Dr. William Petrie, Dr. Renaud Lacroix. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guest with me this morning, Dr. William Petrie, Dr. Renaud Lacroix. We're discussing the Aedes aegypti project here in the Cayman Islands. And Dr. Petrie has pointed out to me that normally their department would not respond to some issues when they're raised, but they felt that there was a obligation to respond to some of the challenges of this that were raised in relation to this project, and we may have gone over some of them earlier. Some of the questions had to do with why is the project being done, what is the need and the benefits, how long will the project last, why was West Bay chosen, has there been proper approval process in the Cayman Islands, was the public consulted in regards to the project, is it this a tested technology? Let's start with that one, the technology, Dr. Lacroix.
This is a very well tested technology. It's been looked upon for 15 years now, 14, 15 years. And it's been tested in the laboratory for a long time before it went out, and it's been through regulatory processes in different countries, and it's never been found to pose any risks to the environment or the human population. And
its effectiveness?
And yes, once we started releasing it in the field, we saw that we achieved 90% reduction and more, up to 99% reduction in the dengue vector. In Brazil, it's been done in Cayman as well, and in Panama. So this is not an experimental technology. This is a proven technology that works. And as a matter of fact, Brazil is now, the municipality of Piracicaba in Brazil is now expanding a project to cover an area of about 60,000 people. The idea is to cover the entire town of Piracicaba, which is over 3,000 people eventually. So this is a very well proven technology that we are now trying to scale up and to be able to protect people from dengue. That's what we aim for.
I know, Dr. Petrie, we also want to discuss the one of the points in the ad about the FDA approval or disapproval in Florida as well, but we have two callers, just like we anticipated that the calls would come in a flurry when we're getting to the end of the show, but we're going to accommodate them because we want to certainly address people's concerns if they have any at all. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hi, morning, OC.
Good morning.
Good morning to your guest.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Dr. Petrie, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. First, let me thank you both in the MRCU and the work that is being done to help to eradicate these concerns. But there are obviously a number of concerns that persons are sharing, and maybe the questions I'll ask, I got 3 questions, very short questions, may have already been discussed and answered, but if you don't mind, for my benefit.
Go right ahead.
About the Well, let me first start with this. There's an example in Europe where we see Monsanto, a very well-known and very regarded, if I can use those words, bioengineering company, who has been pushing their products, and they're the most dominant player internationally in the field of GMO fruits and vegetables. And Europe now is actually seeing the side effects of having these GMO products in their territories, and they're banning now Monsanto and its products. And of course, the U.S. government is pushing Europe to accept Monsanto for whatever reason. But the effects, well, the benefits is clear. They grow in almost anything, in anywhere, which is great. The side effect of that is that once you've dominated that space, it affects the soils, yeah, and the seeds cannot be reproduced. So this is one of the side effects. So once you replace the organic space with this GMO modified engineered product, you cannot replicate that product. So which means you're directed back to Monsanto, and you have to continually being the slave to that service. So my question is now, by leading that, my question is, obviously there are benefits to this. We heard about those over the past couple of weeks. So can you share with us what are some of the negatives? And clearly there are benefits and negatives to everything, right? Share with us what are the negatives. And then secondly, how can these GMO mosquitoes be destroyed or controlled should the objectives of this project would be considered successful? But then there's another side effect, there's a residual effect. How can these mosquitoes be controlled? And thirdly, you mentioned the parent company of this project. I did not get it. Can you please spell the name of that company so that I could write that down?
Sure.
And listen for your answers.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Colin.
you very much. I'll start with your last question because that's probably the
sure.
shortest one. The company is Intrexon, INTREXON. To reply to your other questions, genetically modified organisms are not just of one kind. There's lots and lots of different kinds of using genetic engineering, and so that to make several different products and applications. It's used in vaccines. It's used to produce insulin, for example, for diabetic people. It's also used for plants and in agronomy. I'm not going to elaborate on all the different kinds because we could spend 3 hours on that. What I'm going to point out is the very specific points about the Oxitec technology. What we do is a self-limiting gene that we introduce in our mosquitoes, which is basically a dead end. Those mosquitoes cannot reproduce, so the genes cannot spread in the environment. That's one very specific point about it that is very different from what you mentioned about Monsanto, who is usually giving an advantage to the plants, resistant to an insecticide or resistant to an insect. Those traits give an advantage. We basically give the worst disadvantage possible, which is death of the progeny. So I wanted to point that out. I think there's lots of benefits to our technology, and most of all, it potentially could protect people from dengue and Zika and chikungunya. If there is one disadvantage, it would be that since those mosquitoes cannot persist in the environment, and because of that self-limiting gene, that you need to keep on releasing mosquitoes to keep the population low. But once you get the population reduced by 10 or 20, then you don't need to release as many mosquitoes, so it becomes cheaper. And you can focus in Grand Cayman, if you manage to eliminate Aedes aegypti from the island, for example, you would now have to focus on where can it come back from. And as Dr. Petrie was mentioning, you would monitor very carefully the containers and the port. and probably the airport as well. And you could, not necessarily use Oxitec mosquitoes to be released in that area to avoid the spread of the mosquitoes, or you could use lethal traps or breeding reduction, a bunch of things basically to make it work. And I want to point out as well that other mosquito control methods usually achieve only 30-50% efficiency in Aedes aegypti control, and that you need to purchase them every year. MRCU is spending every year money on insecticides. So I think in the long run, Oxitec provides a very long-term and cost-effective technology to achieve a better result.
Okay.
If I could just add to that, there was one question, and I thank the caller for these questions. And this is a very good point too. How can these be controlled? Supposing you did want to control these Aedes aegypti that you're releasing, how can they be controlled? Well, there's two answers. One is that they're self-controlled in that the gene is self-limiting. All of the offspring die, so that the even if you left them alone, if you stop doing it, the mosquitoes just disappear. Secondly, it actually is the case that these Aedes aegypti, unlike our own wild ones, are susceptible to insecticides. You could actually kill them with insecticides if you wanted to, which does raise the point of integrated control, because when we are going to be releasing the sterile males into the environment, but MRCU is also faced with having to deal with swamp mosquitoes and all the other ones, we will have to continue our operations as normal. And what we will do is we'll between MRCU and Oxitec Cayman is we'll work that out. We just have to be a bit smart about it, how we go about doing that operationally. But that's the kind of things that we have professionals employed to work out. As to the benefits and negatives, the benefits are clear if it can be made to work on a large-scale operational manner. That's what remains to be seen. We know it works. We know it can be made to work. We need to show that it can work and it can be effective on a large scale. As to the negatives, all the reviews and everyone that's looked at it over the years, including the scientists at MRCU and elsewhere, I guess the negative would be that you have to keep releasing the males. You have to keep doing so because the technology is designed not to have this genetically modified mosquito established in the environment. We don't want it established. So I think that covers those questions.
Okay.
If I could just add one point, OC, on a general note, it's not really a scientific question or a technical one, but it's been raised a number of times as to this is a collaboration between scientists at Oxitec and MRCU. It's a collaborative project. There's no conspiracy here. And if Oxitec are in business to make money, well, every other business in the world is in business to make money, and if they don't make money, then they won't survive. I should point out that the suppliers, we have two major suppliers of insecticides and related chemicals and equipment, and also aircraft parts. I must say we spend a lot of money on aircraft parts and aircraft maintenance. Those companies are all in business to make money. I don't see anything untoward about that. If they go out of business, we will have to look elsewhere for the supplies that we need. So I don't think that's a factor in this discussion, really. What will transpire down the road? We're planning 9 months of deployment of this technique, heavily monitored, and that's the key. Renaud and I have been harping on this for a long time. That's the key, the monitoring. And if it proves as successful as we hope, then 9 months from now, or 9 months from when releases start, and they haven't started yet, then we'll review the situation and see what that collaboration is going to continue to be between MRCU and Oxitec Cayman.
Okay, we have two callers. We're going to make those two calls the final calls. So we're going to take their comments and questions and both of them, and then give our guests here an opportunity to respond. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, OC, and good morning to Dr. Petrie and to the other doctor there from
Dr. Lacroix, yes.
Dr. Lacroix.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's Dwayne Ebanks here.
Morning, Dwayne.
Hi, Dwayne.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to try to keep this as succinct as I can and be as respectful as I can. But your last comment there has shown me for a loop, Dr. Petrie. But let me preface what I'm going to say by saying this. I have, over the years, as I did in the West Bay meeting that you have, the single West Bay meeting that you had, I have, over the years, respected MRCU and the fantastic work that MRCU has done over the years to manage the mosquito problem in the Cayman Islands. I can't speak to the back in Little Cayman because that's not where I live, but certainly in Grand Cayman, I have ran behind those little fog trucks, ignorant to the dangers of the insecticides or pesticides that were coming out of there. And I have seen the planes and make believe like I've been flying. So this is by no means any judgment of MRCU at all. I do recognize, though, and these are this is my takeaway. Certainly, having read all I've read, and certainly even listening to you, Dr. Petrie, this morning, because your last words where you say, "I hope," if we hope, if the outcome is as it is perhaps the most troubling of all the statements I've heard this morning. And that is the crux of the challenge for us. We recognize that Oxitec is a company. I wish what you just said had come out from the very beginning. Nobody has a problem with a company, but at the very end of it all, we usually, as consumers, are buying end products that has gone through tremendous tests and otherwise, and usually is voted across the board for the most part as safe, even if it's consumables or something we wear or otherwise. That's not the case in this case, and you guys can dispute that if you care to when I'm off, but I am suggesting to the public that that's not the case in this case. We are actually testing the product, and the Cayman people, and particularly in this case in West Bay, are being subjected to those tests. The hope for and all these other things is what we're dealing with here in Cayman, and I'm not sure that's the most responsible thing for us. Remember, I'm saying this in light of my greatest respect for MRC. At the end of the day, Dr. Petrie, you have an amazing work to do, one that I couldn't do because I'm no scientist by no stretch of the imagination. I've never purported to be, but I do have a brain, and I do read, and I do try to understand and decipher, and I certainly am not known to be anybody who is an alarmist or otherwise. And the people who are genuinely concerned in West Bay have had their concerns flaunted and discarded and put down and ignored by our government. There has not been proper consent. This could never happen in North America. And I know, OC, you just started to ask him about the FDA a while ago, and we're going to touch bases on that because we plan to be on your show this week. But we're going to touch bases on our FDA report. That FDA report, Dr. Petrie has mentioned it on a TV show that I meant on a TV show that I saw this week, talks about them releasing an environmental assessment of no significant impact. And I know you like to tag that on to the very end of it, but the truth about that is most of the questions and concerns that we had starting at that West Bay meeting, had they been properly addressed, if they could have been addressed, and I doubt they could have been addressed in my view, is where our team got most of our questions from and greatest concern from that same report that you're talking about. And what the FDA is doing right now, OC, and for the benefit of your listeners, is that in the next 4 to 6 months, as we understand it, and we've been in touch with GMO Florida, who has worked very closely with the FDA and has kept Oxitec out of South Florida for the last 4 years. This is from GMO Florida, and we work with them, have been getting lots of information from them, and they have supplied us with everything that I'm stating here right now. And the reality of the situation is that they're not convinced. And so in the next 6 months, They're waiting for people's feedback as a result of issuing that environmental assessment of no significant impact. And as a result, will make a decision about whether they will conduct an environment or issue an environmental statement, which should actually speak to a number of different things, including much more scientific research, if that is what they require. The truth is that Cayman is being this is at the heart of it. We're being subjected as human tests in the midst of this, and they're really nothing that we have found. And certainly OSATEC, it's their responsibility to put that out there. We haven't found anything save OSATEC's own evaluation as to outcomes of what introducing genetically modified insects will have both on the environment and on human beings. I couldn't care less what they do in Brazil. And touting this 90% and higher means really nothing to me at the end of the day when you tell me that you need to come back to me in another 6 or 9 months to introduce more genetically modified mosquitoes. And by Dr. Petrie's own admission right there in that studio this morning, he said that the worst thing that could happen is that we constantly have to bring them back. It makes absolutely no sense. And I'd only ask in my closing that the gentleman, Mr. Lacou, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong, sir. I know it's French, and it's no disrespect to you. If you could kindly answer the second half of the question that was asked to you earlier, is Cayman, I'm going to make it very clear, is the Cayman Islands government paying OSATEC in this experiment, or is this purely a collaboration from a scientific basis? Because either way, it's no good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller. No lots to comment on there, gentlemen, but let's take the other caller first, and then, of course, we're going over time, but this is an important subject, not a problem. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, I say.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Right, Daniel, and your guest there. Okay, Jimmy Banks here. Let me throw in a bit of humor on this project.
Please do.
I certainly will repeat it. This project, in my opinion, this originated right there in Georgetown. I was made to understand that you got something like $20-something million, 20-something million mosquitoes to distribute. It is time to be started in West Bay. At this particular time, we have 19 constituencies. Share that amount of mosquitoes up as equal as possible as the constituencies and start to distribute them from Georgetown where the plan hatched. Now, if that is any good to this situation, please use that. That's my humor. Please share it even. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, Jimmy. Always good to interject a little humor into it. Gentlemen?
I appreciate that. If I'll pass over to Renaud in a second because he's got a few things to say here. But if I can just address a couple of things that Dwayne raised. He said that I hope, and this was the most shocking thing that he heard there. This is taken out of context. What I have said, and I'll say it again, is that we know that this technique works. We have used it successfully and got very promising results. So regardless of whatever goes on in Brazil or the United States or Panama or elsewhere, what we haven't demonstrated is that it can be used operationally on a large scale. And this applies to whatever else we're doing. This applies to our aerial larviciding. When we first started larviciding, we didn't all of a sudden treat the whole island with larvicides. We started incrementally, monitored, see how well it worked, tweaked the program, etc. That's exactly what we have to do here. What I've stated is that if the outcome of using the genetically modified technique is as successful as we expect it to be and hope it to be, then we will be in a good position to roll out that deployment further to protect the rest of Cayman as well. Also, to say that has not been reviewed is just simply not correct. It's been reviewed by a group called the Vector Control Advisory Group, 13 independent scientists from around the world. It's been reviewed by the World Health Organization, recommended by the World Health Organization. They obviously could not be in a position to do so if it had not been reviewed. In our local case, it has been reviewed by the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Environment, and also the National Conservation Council. So it certainly has been reviewed. As far as the FDA, the American system, is concerned, yes, it is the case that the FDA has made a preliminary finding of no significant impact. This is just simply a matter of fact. It's not my opinion. And what the American process is going through at the moment, their particular regulatory regime, is that the FDA made this finding. They then have gone into their second phase of their process. It's very different from what happens in the UK or Cayman Islands or Brazil, but it's their own particular system. But one of the points raised by the negative campaign was that the FDA had rescinded their approval. That's just simply not the case. They have made a finding of no significant impact on the environment, and their regulatory process continues.
Mm-hmm. So no significant impact. Is there a definition? I think you just gave a brief definition of that.
If I may.
Sure, Doctor.
So the way the regulatory bodies work all around the world, and they all have different ways of doing it, but the principles are the same. We have submitted an environmental assessment to FDA covering tons of points. I mean, it's about 300 or 400 pages long, I think. And it's not, the FDA has gone through every single word of it, like pretty much a scientific paper, which goes under review before being published. They've taken every statement we made and checked it, and got the data and checked the data. And most of those studies, in each individual studies, and I don't know how many they are, but there are a few dozen, 10 or 20 or 30 or more. Most of those studies have been done through collaborations with universities or research institutes all around the world. They've not been done by Oxitec on its own. They've been done with scientists who have evaluated every question and I've reported their findings most of the time in peer-reviewed papers, which if Mr. Ebanks wants me to send them to him, I'll be very happy to. So there's been an independent evaluation of the Oxitec technology, and a very thorough one. And as Bill mentioned, the FDA is now going through its process. The comments period is now over for about, I think it's a month or something already. And they're now reviewing the comments, and I'm sure they will come back to us, to Oxitec, to say, this question, can you reply it? And if they're not happy with the answer, what they'll tell us. Mm-hmm. And finally, it has the collaboration with MRCU has no monetary exchange into it to this day. This is a scientific collaboration, and we are working together to try to control the mosquito population.
There was one other point that Dwayne raised, O.C., which is worth addressing, and that is the point about with the Oxitec, that one of the criticisms apparently is that you have to keep doing so. You have to keep releasing the sterile males. The point is you want to overwhelm the wild population with your sterile males. If the effect is so successful that you can reduce the population down so that you no longer have a risk of transmitting disease, then obviously that's a very favourable outcome. If it were feasible to actually eradicate the Aedes aegypti, then you don't have to keep doing it. unlike insecticides, and this is the criticism is that you have to keep doing it. Well, you have to keep using insecticides, whether it's Aedes aegypti, the swamp mosquito, or any of the other mosquitoes that we have here. We have to keep going to keep them under control with whatever methods we've got available. And just to also address, so it's not left out, Jimmy's point about the 19 constituencies, spread the genetically modified mosquitoes around all of those equally. Going back to your first point, OC, the mosquitoes bite anybody. They don't care. Political persuasion doesn't come into it. And so what we look at is the numbers of Aedes aegypti in any particular location or area in which to focus to release the mosquitoes.
So it won't be one person, one slap.
Okay. I didn't think of that.
I'd just like to share with the public, and this was a document produced for public comment, preliminary findings of no significant impact, March of 2016, prepared by the Center for Veterinary Medicine, United States Food and Drug Administration, Department of Health and Human Services. And in its final paragraph, NEPA decision and findings, and NEPA would the acronyms for National Environment and Planning Agency, I believe. Is that the one?
Is it planning?
Well, there are two. You have the National Environment Policy Act, which is legislation,
yes.
And then you have
that
NEPA,
must be the agency,
which is the agency. Yes,
yeah, that'll be the
and
agency.
I'll read very quickly here. It says, as previously noted, the review team that included experts from CVM, EPA, and CDC has carefully considered the potential environmental impact of the proposed investigational trial and the non-action alternative. The consequences of escape, survival, and establishment of the OX51-3A in the environment have been extensively studied. Data and information from those studies indicate that there are unlikely to be any adverse effect on non-target species, including humans. Risk of establishment or spread has been determined to be negligible. The investigational trial is short in duration, and any unanticipated adverse effects are unlikely to be widespread or persistent in the environment. Most importantly, the status of the environment is restored when releases are stopped. That is, the released mosquitoes all die, and the environment reverts to its pre-trial status, something that you have repeatedly stated here. The Food and Drug Administration has therefore made the preliminary finding that the proposed field that would not individually or cumulatively have a significant effect on the quality of the human environment in the United States, and is issuing this preliminary FONSI. So, and this is
Yes.
not something that was generated by you. This is coming from the Center for Veterinary Medicine, U.S.
Under
Food and
the
Drug
FDA,
Administration.
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen,
Thank you,
we're
Sam.
way over time, but we thought that 2 hours was going to be a long time, and now we're finding out that 2.5 hours still
Indeed.
is not enough. But I want to give both of you an opportunity for final comments before we leave.
I would just want to reiterate that at present, look, we have a public health imperative here. We don't scaremonger at MRCU. People who know us recognize that is the case. We have never played the disease card, as it were. But we need to be aware that we are under threat from Zika virus in the region. But I do want to stress that dengue has not gone away. It's not going away. Chikungunya is still circulating. Yellow fever is currently on the increase and killing many thousands of people each year. The only way to deal with this threat, at the moment, is to reduce the numbers of Aedes aegypti, to combat that one mosquito that carries all these diseases. And this technique of using genetically modified mosquitoes, people should not be afraid of genetic techniques just because they are new. It's going to be the future of medicine. We're going to see more and more genetic techniques used throughout science and medicine. They will have to be thoroughly reviewed and approved, as this technique has been. We are looking forward to embarking on this project to try and protect all residents and potential visitors to the Cayman Islands from these very dangerous diseases. Thank you,
Okay.
OC.
Dr. Lacroix?
Well, thanks very much for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to reply to the calls and explain what we're doing here. And I think Bill has said most of what the things I wanted to say right now. But I just want to point out that if anybody has any questions about what we're going to do, they should get in contact with us, and they can call MRCU at 949-2557, and we'll be very happy to receive them and reply to their comments and questions.
Well, I want to thank both of you gentlemen for making yourselves available to our listening audience, and certainly to get relevant information out there to the public as well about a very serious issue that is not only facing the Cayman Islands but also facing the world in general. Folks, I want to thank you for allowing us into your homes, into your places of work, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands. We also want to thank our sponsors. For the record, is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance Insurance Company Limited, Tomorrow Secured. You can call them at 949-9744. Visit them at a listed towers. Seaboard Marine, with 35 shipping routes, including from Houston, New York, Miami, and Jamaica. Visit seaboardmarine.com for shipping schedules and more. Seaboard Marine, shipping shore to shore. Fidelity Bank, for all your banking and pension needs, call or visit a Fidelity branch today. And of course, the Cayman Reporter, Caymanian owned, 100% independent, and 100% free. So pick up your free copy today or log on to www.caymanreporter.com. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand. And if you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity. We always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. I also encourage you to continue to listen to your radio station, Radio Cayman. I believe that the proceedings at our Legislative Assembly will continue. Follow them on Breeze 105.3 FM. I say to you, have a great day, and may God continue to bless these 3 Cayman Islands.